Hello and welcome to this week's Conversations with Marléne and Pascale. This week we are going to be talking about why so many women lose their sense of identity and confidence within their marriage and relationships. Now, before we get into that, let's just do a little quick introduction in case you are new to our world. My name is Pascale Lane. I'm a therapeutic relationship and confidence coach, and I help women who are unhappy in their relationship to decide whether to stay in the relationship and make it work, or whether to leave the relationship and start a fresh new life for themselves, guilt-free.
Guilt-free. That's great.
Guilt-free.
That's great. So I'm Marléne Rose Shaw. I'm a therapist, coach, and self-help author, and I help people with relationships and confidence. And I specifically help people with setting boundaries, communicating those boundaries, not people pleasing, and feeling super confident in themselves so that they can have a great life, a great success, and great relationships.
Wonderful. So good.
So, Pascale, why do so many women lose their confidence and their identity in marriage?
Oh, it's such a big topic. I think we could sit here for hours and talk about this. I mean, there are so many reasons why. And as you know, because you know me and my work, and I know you and your work, we know that so much of this stuff starts in our early years experiences and how we form our sense of self and identity and our overall kind of self-concept. But I think it's like, in a nutshell, I think as women, and I just say as women because this is my experience as a woman working with women, and kind of being in tune with, what's going on around me professionally and personally. I think women overwhelmingly carry the load. And that's not to say that all men don't, because there are some wonderful little nuggets out there that do. But I think overwhelmingly women bear the load of so much within a relationship, marriage, family life. And I think after a while, that naturally takes its toll. And having to be the one that keeps all of the plates spinning all of the time. I think women are natural most of the time. Women are natural caregivers. They are the ones that does the looking after, the supporting, the domestic stuff. And so when you are taught at such a young age to be a nurturer, we were talking last week, you were talking about, people pleasing, and we were talking about how that starts so early in life. It becomes so easy to just put everybody else's needs above your own. And so often women are even sacrificing their careers for those child rearing years. And I think it just becomes a way of habit that as long as everybody else is happy, as long as everybody else is doing okay, I kind of don't really matter, because my role is to just make sure that everybody else is happy. And of course, the more and more that goes on, the longer that goes on for, the harder it is to claw it back, because your whole identity shifts when you become a mother. So if we're talking about the overwhelming majority of my clients are mothers, your whole identity changes when you're a mum. Like you're no longer that young, pert and spritey, going out doing all the things that you used to. Your priorities change, and your priorities should change. Like, I understand that completely because you're a mum, but then you kind of get stuck so often, and that just you don't really know where you're meant to be pulling from to kind of get yourself back. And so when my clients come to me, they're typically in their mid-40s, at a point where the kids are either grown up or certainly less dependent now, and they realise how unhappy they've been. They realise how much of their themselves they've sacrificed over the years. Their relationship is probably a bit pants, because they feel taken for granted, disrespected, not having, resentful that they aren't having their own needs met, but also aren't meeting their own needs. And so my work is very focused on then how do we, like, do you want to stay or go, from you leave your relationship or stay in your relationship is kind of like is the umbrella. That's the kind of goal that we're looking to fix. But invariably within that whole self-identity becomes such a huge part of the work. That was a long answer. Is that okay?
It's there's so much to it. No, I really like the way you talk about identity. Actually, it's so important, isn't it? I mean, it's, you talk about it, but we need to kind of almost underline that word identity, don't we?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
because when when you have a baby, one baby or more, of course you have to, that tiny little being takes over your entire life. It's remarkable just how much it does, how such a small little creature can take over your entire life, but it does. And so mum has to come behind that. But as you say, women get stuck in that then, don't they? They get stuck in that not being seen, not having their identity. I work with couples as well as individuals, and I see it all the time. And I also see, and I'm curious to know if this is your experience, that it's also a learnt thing, that women have grown up in their childhood as little girls. They looked up to their mother and their father, and they saw how they were how their mothers were in that, or if they're in a gay relationship, how one of the mothers was, whatever roles were taken, but there will be invariably one person, one female caregiver somewhere along the line who has done that.
Did it all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we so often, I mean, not you and me, because this is what we do for a living, but I think so often collectively we underestimate the importance of our early years experiences with our caregivers. Like our parents, no shade here, but our parents were our first and most important teachers. For better or for worse. That's where we learn our relationships in how we receive love, how we communicate, watching them, how they receive love, how they communicate, how they resolve conflict, and we're learning all of this at such a young age. It's impossible for that not to shape your core identity and values. And how much we perceive we have been loved, how much we have been responded to, how compassionate our parents have been, how incompassionate, how much shame, how much criticism, like all of this stuff really, 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 really goes into form our self-esteem, our self-worth, our self-confidence, like the whole lot. And so when we then go into our adult relationships, and then don't get me started on then how we parent our own children, because that's the whole generational. Well, Marléne, I get so juiced up when I talk about this stuff because I love it so much. But that is what we bring into our relationships. And so our expectation, and that's just one person in the relationship. Then of course you've got the other person in the relationship, arguably a husband, but I work with women, so it might be a wife. They have their own story and their own narrative as well, and their own expectations about how things should be done. And so you bring all of that together, and then really it's a subconscious battle of the will as to what kind of sticks and what forms and what doesn't. And so it's easy. I think when our kids get a little bit older and they go to I'm just kind of this is a hypothesis. I'm not saying this is fact. And neither is this right. But I'm saying, like, when our children start to go to school and they start to develop their own sense of autonomy and their own, that's really when we should be learning to kind of go, okay, fine, like, they're less dependent on us. Of course, they're still dependent. I mean, even when they're 18, they're still dependent on us, but in their own way. But when we should recognize the point when we are able to start going, okay, fine, this is a little bit of time for me now. I can start delegating a little bit more. I can start handing back a little bit of responsibility. I can start practicing a little bit more self-care. But I think it's so difficult to do that, especially when you've had more than one child, because you set yourself back to the beginning of the clock every time you have a new baby. And then by the time you're kind of 15 years down the road, you're like, Jesus Christ, who am I?
Who am
what
I?
is my
And
purpose
actually,
these days?
that is what you just, you're saying about losing your identity. That's what it is. Who am I?
Yeah.
And actually, I'm curious to ask you, because one thing I find with couples that I work with, and I'm curious to ask you about that, is that I sometimes, working with couples, I will find that a woman is saying, they're sort of rebelling against that loss of identity. She'll be saying, well, I saw my mother, in so many words, lose her identity, or I see my mother-in-law has lost her identity, and I'm not going to do that. And so it's almost still impacting them because they're fighting against something then. Exactly. Is that something you see?
It's still there.
Yeah,
it is something I see. It's not something I see, to be fair, it's not something I see as much, because I think that isn't, I mean, I think that that's definitely a thing. But it's easy how these these generational patterns, like I always used to say, we recreate it. We recreate these patterns of behavior, but sometimes we recreate it in our own way. We kind of like have to put our own spin on it, because we really don't want to do it that way. So we go so hard to not do it that way, but we end up recreating exactly the same thing, just in a different way. For women out there who are really, and I think you're talking like quite the other end of the spectrum, really kind of like doing it for themselves, and almost to a point of kind of detachment from their family life, is something that I used to see more in my social work days, actually. Than I do. And I think that's just because I'm very clear about who I want to work with now, and how I work and how I can help you. But that is definitely a thing, for sure.
I kind of see it when I'm working with couples, and the woman will be saying, I do not want to be like this, and yet she is doing that. Yeah. So there's that is that whole identity is so important. So what can people do about it, Pascale? What can women do about it if they feel that they've lost their confidence or they've lost their identity in their relationship? What can they do about that?
I think the first step to anything that we want to change, regardless of whether it's a habit, a situation, I think the first thing is always to recognize it, and to kind of see it and acknowledge it. So, and because so many women don't, okay, or I mean, I know so many people don't, but I'm talking about women to women. So many women don't acknowledge it, or don't want to acknowledge it. And so the first part has to be recognizing it, and then making the decision that you want it to be different. You don't have to know how you want it to be different, but definitely recognizing that you want it to be different.
That intention to change.
Intention to change. And last week, Marléne, we were talking about people pleasing. And I know we only scratched the surface on one of your areas of people pleasing, but I think, in exactly the same way that we were talking about then, if anybody hasn't watched that video, just drop us a comment below and we can tag you in it. Identifying that you can love your family without having to sacrifice loving yourself. You know, just because I want to start choosing me, that doesn't mean that I love you any less. It doesn't mean that I'm less available for you. It just means that I'm kind of like, I'm just starting to look after me
I love
and
that. Yeah.
kind of re-identify with myself again, get to know myself again. And I mean, that happens a lot as well. Like I digress now. So stop me if I go on a stop me if I go out the stable doors. But this happens a lot in menopause as well. So how menopause feeds into all of this is also very important, because once we hit 40s and our hormones are changing and our body is changing, all sorts of shit's going on in our body and our brains that we are not always aware about. So actually having this kind of need now, like major importance, if it is important to you, to kind of know yourself and trust yourself and gain that identity and gain that self-confidence back again, is so important. So I won't go on the menopause one, because that's a whole different topic, maybe for another time. But I mean, really identifying what does need to change. Like, what are the, if I could change, and I often ask this to my clients, and I ask this to myself as well. If I needed to change 1, 2, 3 things about what's going on right now, what would those things be?
Yeah.
What actually needs to change for me to shine brighter? And that might be external. That might be about other people in my household. But that might also be about something that I need to do for me. So you and I both know the importance of self-care. I know for me the importance of self-care. I know how vital it is for my emotional well-being, but I also know how vital it is for the emotional well-being of everybody in my home. So if I'm not looking after myself and I'm not kind of doing the things that are important to me, then everybody suffers, not just me, everybody does. So identifying what those things are that need to change. Maybe it's about delegating chores. Maybe it's about saying enough of this BS now, like you need to pick up some slack. Maybe it's about saying this relationship isn't serving me any longer. And I mean, I'm going to go goosebumpy here, because this, I would say this is probably 50% of the women that I work with that don't know whether they want to stay or go. But actually, once we start doing this work, it's totally clear what the answer is. And it's like, we can thank that relationship. It doesn't have to be bitter. It doesn't have to be, you know, like separating from your partner or your husband doesn't have to be a failure. It doesn't have to be toxic. It doesn't have to be abusive. It doesn't have to get nasty. It can just be about saying, it's time for me to start choosing me now, and this is what it looks like going forwards. So, you know, that's the sad, I say that's the sad reality. It's a sad reality because I think when most relationships fail or end or don't work, or however you want to word it, it's the end of a cycle. So we, you know, there can be sadness with that, but there can also be much joy and excitement that goes with that as well for the next chapter, and everybody finding happiness, like in whatever that looks like. And the other part really is about what kind of lights you up. What are the things that you want? You know, identifying what needs to change. Maybe that's got more of a negative kind of like, this has got to stop, this has got to change, I'm not doing this anymore. But also, what are the things that you really want to do? What are the things that kind of, that when you say it out loud, you get a little bit of excitement and your heart rate increases and you're like, oh, I really, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. It might just be joining a Zumba class. It might be going out and making sure that you've got more time to go out and see your friends. You know, whatever that looks like for you. What are the things that you, a change of career, a new training course? Like, what are the things that get you really excited? I'm starting a new course in September on psychosexual therapy. I'm so excited about it because I love learning. I'm really excited to be developing my toolkit. And I'm really delighted to be able to add another string to how I help my clients to improve their life. So, you know, it's like, whatever that looks like to you, what lights you up, what do you want to do? And then I think that the final thing, and then there are loads of things, obviously, Marlene, there are so many things, but I think the last thing that is really important to me is to have boundaries. And again, we touched on this last week, but how can you get better at putting in place personal boundaries, learning to say no, learning to do the things that you want to do, even if that means disappointing others. And I'm not talking about hurting others, I'm just talking about disappointing others. And just actually saying, no, this is something that is really important to me. This is something I want to do, or no, I don't want to do that for you. I was having a conversation with somebody last week, actually, about how no is a full sentence. And we can often get into ways of kind of having to justify why we're not going to do something. And actually, we don't need to justify. I'm getting much better now at not justifying. I still feel that need to do it. But actually just saying, no, I'm really sorry, I can't do that. And just kind of like leaving it. Leaving it there, and the way people respond back to you is actually a lot more positive than like you kind of think it is. So whatever those boundaries look like, whether it's about delegating, whether it's about saying no, whether it's about removing toxic people from your life, distancing yourself from people that don't make you feel good about yourself. That doesn't have to be your husband or wife or partner. That could just be family relationships, work relationships, friendships that don't make you feel good about yourself. Actually just learning to push back, because when we are not able to implement boundaries, that also affects our self-confidence and our
it's everything
and everything else.
You know, it's interesting as you talk about, you know, losing confidence and identity in marriage, but actually there's something in there also about doing it for yourself regardless. Work on you first, get your identity back for you, because it's not your partner who's done this to you, it's just the way life has been and the pattern that's played out and the circumstances of life. And it's about saying, well, I'm going to take a step back and look at my life and what do I want to do for my life. And
I mean, it's such a great point, because when we do, and we both work within the context of relationships, so we both know that when we do that work, so many relationships can be saved. Actually, once you start stepping up for yourself, and actually kind of empowering yourself and building that confidence, and then suddenly the ground that the relationship is built on that feels so unstable actually then starts to kind of, okay, maybe it won't solidify, maybe it won't solidify, maybe that's the end of the relationship, but actually there's a really good chance that it actually shifts the relationship for the better, and makes it a lot more solid.
I often say it's like doing a dance. You know, you dance together. If one of you decides to change your steps, the other person naturally has to follow suit, don't they? So it's about taking that personal responsibility. And I absolutely love what you said about this idea about, you know, if I put me first, then others will suffer. You know, it's this sort of, we live in a world of duality, so we tend to think it's this way or that way. It's up or it's down, or it's dark or it's light. You know, we live in a world of duality, so we have this sort of ingrained brain pattern that says, well, if I'm happy, you won't be. But actually, it's not true, is it? Not true at all. It's like, as you said, if I'm happy, everybody will be happy, particularly if you're mum.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel so passionately about it, because I see it in my own children. You know, I've seen how, even though for so many, not for like so many years, as in like over like periods of years, I've been unhappy and my children have been unhappy, but I've seen it so many times over the years where I have been unhappy. And you think so hard that you're protecting your children, and you think so hard that they're not absorbing it, but they are. They are, and it just comes out in different ways. It comes out in either anger, it comes out in anxiety, it comes out in, you know, so many different ways. And then when we flip it and we then start charging our battery and doing the work for ourselves, everybody's happier. Everybody's happier, because the whole energy in the home is so much more positive. It's good stuff.
So
Love it.
It's about, isn't it? It's about just taking that, showing up for yourself. I say taking responsibility, but it kind of sounds heavy saying that, as if there's something you must do. It's about, I mean it in terms of showing up for yourself, you know, showing up for yourself and saying, okay, I feel like I've lost myself a bit in this relationship. So how can I get myself back for the sake of me and everybody else? It's wonderful work.
It is, and you know, you make an excellent point. It's not to say, it's so difficult, isn't it? Because I've struggled with this over the years whenever I talk about this so much, because it's not like I want to put more burden on you, that like you have to be happy and that you're the cornerstone of the family, and that, you know, if you're miserable, then everybody else is miserable and that's your fault. It's not, it's never that. It's never that. But I think at the same time, there's a very fine line between recognizing that overwhelmingly, not all of the time, but for the vast majority, we are the primary caregivers. We are the cornerstone of the family. And so it's just about recognizing, it's about giving yourself permission to look after you. Because when you give yourself permission to look after you, the automatic fear is that I'm not looking after everybody else. But actually the flip side of that, the correct answer for that, is when I look after me, I am looking after everyone else better.
It's seeing it in that positive light, isn't
that
it?
Is it.
Yeah. It's not about doing something wrong. It's about making it better, making it much better. Good stuff, Pascale.
Fabulous. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my free masterclass, Should I Stay or Should I Go, for anybody that's interested in watching that. I'm going to put that in the comments below. Just need to just sign up. Like I said, it's free. It's 30 minutes. And of course, if anybody's got any questions on this or on anything else, drop me a DM or a message, and I'm happy to chat.
I know lots of people have really got a lot from that masterclass, haven't they, Pascale? A lot of people have watched that masterclass.
I feel like I've struck gold with it. Actually, it's really good. It's been years of tweaking and adjusting, and I think I've got there with it. I feel really happy with it. So yeah,
I'd recommend anybody watch it who's watching this.
Thank you. Fabulous. All right, thank you so much, Marléne. Until next time, my friend.
Okay, brilliant. Look forward to seeing you.